just feels like this is the Lando Norris dichotomy. When the pressure's off, he looks a lot like any one of the greats that you could ever mention. But when the pressure's on, it's very rarely that you'll get a Monaco qualifying session out of Lando Norris at this point.
Yeah, and he's made it worse for himself, because what he's done now is ignited a fire under Oscar Piastri, right from here to the end of the year, for sure. And before the first corner in Singapore, there was some compliance probably between the two, mainly Oscar giving Lando a bit of room. But I don't think that's going to apply anymore. Regardless of what the team say to Oscar now, Oscar's going to have Mark Webber in his ear, which is a good thing, saying, mate, it's your championship. You don't get many chances, go for it. And he's absolutely correct to do that.
So go on then, Peter. Let's talk about this McLaren dynamic, because it felt a bit weird. Initially, I felt like Oscar had every right to feel hard done by the way that McLaren had treated him. They said that they were going to have conversations with both drivers to make sure whoever wins the championships, whether we were even allowed to celebrate. Well, they'd won the constructors and they didn't consider Oscar Piastri's feelings. They were all in the background while Oscar was still at the scrum. It was just like, sabotage is the word that's been bandied around, aka favoritism. Are you seeing that at McLaren, Peter? Well,
this question comes up many times on live streams, and we've talked about it as well. I mean, let me be clear. There's no way in the world McLaren would ever produce anything other than the two best possible cars for their two drivers. So it's not a question of mechanical favoritism. But for the first time, we saw something I'd never seen before, or heard something, which was asking a driver when he thought the other car should stop. I've never heard that before in my life. Lando Norris deciding on what Oscar Piastri's pit strategy should be. I couldn't believe it that they actually asked Lando to do that. And I cannot remember that ever happening. So what that effectively means, well, Lando, we're 100% behind you now, mate. Your championship, your call. You're going to make calls now for when Oscar's going to stop. That's what happened in Singapore. So why won't it happen again? And that to me is the first time we've seen real favoritism towards Lando. And they may say, he's behind in points. We want to get him up to an equal point where they've got the same number of points going into Brazil or whatever it's going to be, some master plan they've got there. But that, to me, I mean, can you imagine Patrick Head getting on the radio to Riccardo Patrese and saying, Riccardo, when do you think we should bring Nigel Mansell in? I mean, if Nigel heard that, I mean, what do you think how would he react? I mean, I'm still absolutely gobsmacked that happened. And it was interesting, Lando's response. I think he was shocked too, because he said, well, he was suddenly thinking, wow, they're asking me. And I'm not surprised he was surprised, because this is unprecedented. Asking one driver when the other driver should stop. You do your own thing. And obviously you work harmoniously between the two race engineers, and you try to avoid a stacked pit stop, obviously. But, you don't start asking the drivers when the other car's going to stop. And could you have permission to stop on this lap, please, Lando?
Isn't this McLaren doing their weird thing? They're always keen for the second car to cover off anybody that's behind him. And in this case, Charles Leclerc, not necessarily breathing down Oscar's neck, but they wanted to do, as they did at Monza, pit Oscar first to make sure that Charles Leclerc that Oscar wasn't at risk of the Charles Leclerc undercut. But it's
of course it was that.
But it's too much, Peter, isn't it? It's like
of course it's that. But you get on the radio and you say, Lando, because we want to cover off Leclerc, Oscar's coming in now, you're coming in then. Bang, end of story. You don't say, would you mind? What do you think? Can Oscar wants to come in before you. What do you think? You okay with that, Lando? That's my point. You don't start asking one driver to make a decision about the other car. And that's what happened. On top of the first corner, when basically, as Oscar phrased it, he barged through, hit me and got in front. Then they gave the option to Lando as to when Oscar could stop. How do you think Oscar felt at the end of that race?
Not great, Peter.
Not not great. I would imagine absolutely, ropeable, mate. Ropeable.
Yeah.
and this will not go away. He's a professional, as I said in the video last night, and he'll be very nice about the Constructors' Championship, and he'll all this and that, and he'll say the right things. But deep down inside, I can tell you now, he'll be burning inside.
Well, let's speak to that, Peter, because this is the first time. Normally, Mr. Stoicism, Mr. Consistency is always, you barely hear a change in his tone over the radio, but this feels like it was the first time and an inflection point as far as the McLaren intra-team relationship. I remember Oscar said, so are we cool with Lando just barging me out the way, or what? What's the go there, mate?
To his credit, though, he still said that in quite a low monotone, didn't he? It was, are we cool then? Are we that? It was, imagine if that was Fernando, for example, a few decibels more, please. But I thought that was an interesting thing as well, because I'm sure he was thinking within the team, are we cool about that? Forget about the FIA and making a decision. In the team, are we cool about that? Or do you think within the team we should tell Lando to give that position back to me because this was not what we signed up for? But of course they misinterpreted it. They immediately thought, oh, he's thinking about, will the FIA take any action? As soon as the FIA said no further action to be made, they couldn't wait to get back on the radio to Oscar and say, oh, there's no further action being taken. We'll talk about it after the race, Oscar. But of course, Oscar wanted the decision made there and then by the team, an internal thing by the team. And in the same way you can swap positions for any number of reasons. That's what I think was going on, and they misunderstood that as well.
Do you think
rather
the team
ham-fistedly?
Do you think the team should have intervened, Peter? What was the action? If you
well, I don't know. I really don't know, and you don't know. Nobody knows with respect any discussions that McLaren have actually had as part of Zak's master plan about first corners and how to behave. And so, without knowing what the ground rules are, it's very difficult to say. But I suspect the ground rules are that you gain positions if you can, but you do not run into the other car. I would suspect, if I had to make a guess, pretty logical. And guess who ran into Oscar's car? So on that basis, what's the penalty within the team? If you get a position by running into the other car, do you give it back? And he had a damaged front wing end plate. And as it turned out, it didn't actually affect his performance at all, I don't think. Maybe it did a bit, but not a lot. They didn't change the nose or anything like that. So that's a sign that it presumably didn't make a lot of difference. But if you're McLaren at that point, lap one, and you're thinking, Lando's got the damaged front nose, Oscar's car still looks perfect, who would you put your money on there to be the better bet in terms of taking the race to George and Max? Probably Oscar.
Yeah, fair.
He doesn't have the damaged front wing. And yet they didn't. They let Lando stay in front. And Oscar just, I think at that point, for the first time ever, probably, he just thought, what is this all about? And I think that's what we saw with Oscar yesterday. I think we just saw him a bit deflated.
Yeah. As per the message when they wanted to scenario plan in the eventuality that
there's
a
do
safety
whatever you
car.
want, the way things have gone today, stuff it, Yeah, exactly.
Past hatred, there is apathy and indifference, Peter.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Whatever. I feel bad for him. And I think you're right, Peter. This feels like an inflection point, though.
Of course, it's an inflection point in terms of eyeball to eyeball, first lap, any corners coming up and any of the remaining Grand Prix circuits. You think Oscar's going to be nice to Lando? He's leading in points now. It's another mistake from Lando, Oscar's got the points advantage. Look at Max v. Lewis in 21. Max wasn't afraid to do the odd bit of T-boning to Lewis because if they were both out, guess who that would favour? Same with Oscar.
There is.
I'm not saying that Oscar's going to do that or he's that sort of driver, but if they're close, I can tell you who's going to break, who's going to break first. It's going to be Lando Norris.